Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And I'm doing another What I've Been Watching Recently, kind of give some movie reviews of some things I've seen, kind of catch up what I've seen here on the channel. As you know, I don't really go to the movie theater and see movies. I usually just catch them on streaming anyway. So yeah, so I wanted to catch up on some things I've seen and give my thoughts on them. Not too much. I got about 5 movies to talk about today. First movie I want to talk about is Transformers 1. Yeah, I finally got around to watching this one, and wow, what a good movie. I was really amazed by how good this movie was. Really kind of surprised. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it is. It's definitely one of my favorite films I've seen this year. I'd say between Wild Robot and Transformers 1, animation movies have done really well this year. I think they've been some of the best movies I've seen so far. Yeah, and I know Moana 2 is not doing very well, so I don't see another really good anime movie coming out. But anyways, yeah, Transformers 1, it's a movie I didn't know I needed out of the Transformers franchise, basically. And I'm so glad we got it. You know, of course, we got all these Michael Bay live-action Transformers movies, and they've been really pretty bad, mostly. I think the first movie's pretty good, but since then, really bad movies. And it just, to me, gets worse and worse with each movie. And I always thought, you know, the thing I would love to see is Transformers without any humans. I always thought the humans kind of ruined the movies. Like, if we just had the robots, like, that's the best part of the movie. And that's what Transformers 1 gives us. It's no humans. It's just a story about the robots themselves. And I thought it worked really, really well. And it's a really cool origin story and an interesting one that I never thought of being, you know, that's the way Transformers should go. But it's such a great way of telling that story, with Optimus Prime basically and Megatron being friends at the beginning, actually being like best friends, which is such a way I didn't think they would go. And just seeing from the trailer, you knew that was going to happen. But they did a really good job of really showing these guys being friends in this world. And what's cool is that they're not really Optimus Prime or Megatron. They have different names at the beginning. Like Orion Rex, I think, is Optimus Prime's name. And I forget, Megatron had a different name. So it's cool how they transformed into the characters that we know, you know, that we would know them to be. But there had to be kind of a good story arc between the two characters before we get there. I thought that was a really cool idea. I love the whole lore of the Transformers. Like, I thought that was a real cool world building, you know, lore, that there's these Optimus robots that are kind of like the legends that kind of create everything, and that there's this, you know, magic kind of magical device. I forget, it's called the something of leadership. Anyways, that if you have that, then you're like the leader of the Transformers, whatever. And it's something that everybody's trying to get to. And the idea that everybody thinks this one guy is like the hero, and then he's not. I'm not spoiling some of the movie, but it's pretty obvious, you know, who the villain's going to be. It's the guy that everybody thinks is the hero. And then you're like, I'm pretty sure that guy's going to be the villain. And pretty much that's what happens. But yeah, the whole backstory of how that happens and how everything's a lie that they've been told. Because only certain Transformers can actually, you have to have a certain orb or something like that you have to have inside your chest to be able to transform into a machine, you know, like a car or whatever, or a jet or whatever. And the ones that don't have them, they're kind of seen as like less citizens, and they're like, the two main characters are miners. They're trying to mine for this certain energy source, and the ones that can transform are like higher level beings, you know. I thought that was a really cool idea. And then about an hour into the movie, man, you get some really good storytelling, and you get the whole backstory, and that part was just amazing, where I'm like, oh wow, this makes total sense. It really tells, you know, what's going on and why the characters are the way the society is structured the way it is. I know if you don't know the movie, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but yeah, there's a part where they find out like, oh, like every robot should transform. It's just that we got our orb stolen from us and we need to get like some kind of orb thing. And then, so they can't transform until about more than halfway through the movie, I think. And then they get the orbs and then they start transforming into the, to what we know, Optimus Prime being the big semi truck and Megatron being like a jet, I think, or something like that. And we also get Bumblebee in here, who becomes like a side character, or becomes one of the main characters, but great kind of supporting character in the movie. And then there's a female robot as well. I forget her name. I should probably know more about the lore behind all that, but of course we know Bumblebee because he's in all the Transformers movies as well. And I think he turns into a car as well. And I forget what she turns into. Anyways, but yeah, so it's cool when they get the orbs and they start transforming into the what we know them to be. That was awesome. Like that scene where it's amazing shot where they're going they're like flying in the air in slow motion and they turn into their machine that they turn into, and the sound effect of that changing. Oh, like I don't know, I got like some goosebumps because like I mean I used to watch Transformers as a kid, the cartoon and the movie and all that back in the 80s, whatever. So I have a little nostalgia for Transformers, like not big nostalgia, but I remember kind of playing with the toys and watching the cartoon series. So even me, when they did that, I was like, oh my God, like that was such an awesome moment as like a fan of the Transformers. And seeing that, and there's some great lines, like anytime, Optimus Prime goes, roll out, you're like, oh yes, that's the line. that's the line that he says, like, oh, so great. When you get those nostalgia moments is really good in the movie. But it's also very funny. It's an absolutely hilarious movie. I laughed throughout it. Especially Bumblebee is definitely a really funny character. Great voice acting by Michael Keegan Key. He's one of my favorite comedic actors. He's so good, and he does such a good job with Bumblebee. He's hilarious. He's kind of set that way, but overall, there's so many funny lines throughout the movie that I was like, wow, I didn't expect it to be this funny. So man, it's just a perfect combination of great story, great character arcs, great ending. I mean, the last battle scene, and then the betrayal between friends. Oh, it's so good. And when Orion Rex, and I'm spoiling the movie here, I'm sorry, but Orion Rex becomes Optimus Prime. Oh, that's such a good scene because they're like waiting for that to happen, and then when it finally happens because of his sacrifice, that he gets like the leadership thing, and then you're like, oh my gosh. He turns into Optimus Prime. You're like, yes, because I love Optimus Prime. That's always been my favorite character. Of course, he's the leader, of course, and he's kind of the main character. But man, that was so awesome. And then the Megatron and Optimus Prime fight at the end is so good. Yeah, it's such a great story from beginning to end. The character arcs are amazing. The ending, amazing. Like I said, hilarious. Good action sequences. It's like the perfect animation movie to me. Yeah, it's one of the best I've seen anyway. So yeah, definitely see Transformers 1 if you haven't seen it. One of my favorite of the year. All right, let's get to a movie called Midas Man that I got around to. Of course, Midas Man is about Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles, and managed some other groups in Liverpool. But of course, mostly known for managing, the most popular band in the world and my favorite band of all time, the Beatles. So of course I had to watch this movie. And when I saw this movie was coming out, I was like, okay, well, I have to watch it. It's about the Beatles, anything Beatles related, like I have to watch it. And I thought it was interesting that they finally got to a Brian Epstein kind of biopic. I've actually been saying for many years that I think they could make an interesting Brian Epstein biopic. I think he's an interesting character. When you think about how he, came from managing, his parents had like a furniture store or whatever, and he managed a record store that was connected to it, whatever, and how he worked really hard to make that a really good record store. And then of course saw the Beatles, happened to be at the right place right at the time, saw the Beatles playing at the Cavern Club, and then decided to manage them, though he's never managed a band before, but somehow got him signed on, and then they shot off and became, the most popular band we've ever seen. And seeing how that happens. And then also he obviously had a lot of inner struggles. He was a closeted homosexual at a time when, that was really looked down upon, and he had to hide that fact. And so he had a lot of, abusive relationships because of that, I guess you can say. Or, he had to have, He had to hide it in back alleys and stuff like that. So obviously a lot of, as it would be with anybody, I guess it'd be, really hard, like I said, struggles. He had, I think, a problem with alcohol, and eventually overdosed, and spoilers, I guess, but at I think age 33 or something like that, he overdosed on alcohol and prescription drugs, I think, or something like that. Right when the Beatles were still like at the height of their career. So it's a very tragic story. So I always thought they'd make an interesting story. So I'm glad that they tackled it in Minus Man, tackled a very important figure, I think, in rock history, I guess, in some senses. And overall, I wasn't real crazy about the movie, I guess I should say, overall. So it was cool at parts, like when he meets the Beatles, and you do get some moments of Beatle history that, as a big Beatle fan, you've seen those and you know what's going to happen. In fact, I knew certain things were like certain lines were coming. I'm like, oh, he's going to say that famous line, and they would say the famous line. And I thought that was kind of cool at times. I'm like, oh, that's cool that they took the time to, play out some of these famous scenes in Beatle history. So that was kind of cool to see overall. It was cool to see, actors playing the Beatles. It feels like it's been a while since I've seen the Beatles portrayed, and I know we're supposed to be getting a biopic in the next couple of years, I think, of the Beatles, which I'm excited for. Hopefully they do a good job of it, because I've always said for a long time, I said, if there's one biopic I would love to see is one of the Beatles. I mean, come on, my favorite band, most popular band in the world of all time. Why hasn't there not been a biopic? Everybody's gotten a biopic, and they need one. So, so it's cool to get this. Now, of the Beatles, I would say the actor who played John, I thought did a pretty good job. I thought straight on. I mean, it sounded and had a pretty good look of John. I thought overall pretty good, captured him really good. Paul did decent, I think. To me, maybe the best one was George. The actor who played George just nailed George so good. I was like, that was one where I was like, wow, it feels like I'm watching George Harrison on screen, a young George Harrison. Not only that he had the accent down perfectly, but even the facial expressions. When I saw him just, with these facial expressions, I was like, yeah, that's a George Harrison facial expression. Anyway, so I thought he did a good job. Of course, they had Pete Best for most of the movie. The guy who played Pete Best, did a pretty good job as well. And they even show him getting fired, which is kind of cool to see that. We know that happened in real life, and kind of see that, on screen was kind of cool. See that big moment where Pete Best gets fired and Ringo gets put on, and then that's the Beatles, Ringo, man, the actor who played Ringo did a really terrible job, I thought. That was like the worst part of the movie to me, was that, and he's not in it very much, and he doesn't have much dialogue, so it's not like not ruin the movie, but he just didn't really look or sound like Ringo, so that was weird. Like, that was one member they didn't nail very good. But anyways, the big negative to me is that the actor who played Brian Epstein, I didn't feel like really nailed the character. And that's coming from a big Beatles fan and again, Brian Epstein is kind of a mysterious character. We don't have like a lot of footage. Documentary wise, we don't really have a lot of footage of him or a lot of interviews with him or him talking that much or doing anything. He seems like a very behind the scenes guy in all the documentary stuff I've seen, even though he's like kind of the boss or somewhat, or the manager of the Beatles. He's obviously a big part of everything. So it's hard to say, exactly how he was. You read about, I mean, I've read a lot of, I've read his autobiography that he wrote, his memoirs that he wrote before he died. I have that book, in fact, A Cellar Full of Noise, which is a really cool autobiography or memoirs, I should say, by Brian Epstein. Anyways, and I've read, other books that talk about him. So anyway, so for me personally, as a big Beatles fan, I don't know, it just didn't feel quite like Brian Epstein. I didn't feel like they quite nailed that character. And I guess to me, it was like, he seems very quiet from what I've seen, but he was a boss. I mean, he was, he did, this is the way it's going to be kind of person. And he had a lot of confidence, I feel like, in himself and what he was doing. And he knew what the right thing was to do. And he ended up being right, because he got the Beatles where they needed to be. And I don't know if they showed that enough, like of him, really being a really good idea guy that was really confident in what he was doing. maybe I'm wrong, but it felt like sometimes he was a little intimidated by the Beatles when he was around them. The actor, the character that was in the movie, felt like he wasn't very confident in himself. He always kind of second guessed everything, and maybe he was that way. But I guess I don't know. To me, I didn't feel that way when I read about him, especially or see any documentary about talking about him. I don't know. I felt like he was more authoritative than he was in the movie. That was my feeling. I might be wrong, but that just was my feeling about it. Uh, Anyways, but yeah. So I don't know. I'm not saying the actor was terrible, but I don't know. He just didn't quite nail what I pictured Brian Epstein, I guess. And the other thing is the Beatles themselves. I don't think they quite nailed them either in some senses. Like every scene the Beatles are in, they are just joking all the time. It's just joke after joke, just screwing around, goofing off. And yeah, they did some of that. They joked, they goofed, just like that. But I don't think they did it all the time. But every time you saw the Beatles, like I was a little cringy when I was like, gosh, like I don't think they told jokes. Every single line was a joke. But that's what I felt like in the movie. They really portrayed them as like they always was goofing off. And I'm like, I don't know. So that took me away a little bit of the Beatles. I feel like I feel like screenwriting wise, the movie was not very good. Like I think it could have been done a little bit. They needed a better. They need a better script. They need a better director. I feel like it wasn't directed very well, and it wasn't written very well as a movie. Anyways, and so which is sad because I think you could make a really cool biopic of Brian Epstein. And all that. And yeah, I wish they could have done it a little bit better on the movie. But I kind of commend them on making a Brian Epstein biopic because I think they should give more story to Brian Epstein because he was a big deal, and he was a big deal for the Beatles. And so I'm kind of glad they made one, but I just wish it was better. So to me, it's like it's a light not recommend. I give like 2.5 stars out of 5, anyways. But yeah, that's The Minus Man. I'm going to talk about Saturday Night Live, a movie about the making the very first episode of Saturday Night Live back in 1975. Yeah, this was a really cool idea for a story or for a movie. When I first heard about it, I was really like hyped. I was like, man, this is definitely a story I would really love to see. I thought it was an interesting idea, anyways. That you're gonna talk about because it was kind of crazy. Saturday Night Live was a very unique, one of kind variety show that turned into one of the big. I mean, it's been 50 years now, that's the cool thing is that they did the movie obviously because it's Saturday Night Live's having their 50th anniversary. I guess this next year in 2025 will be 50 years of Saturday Night Live, and I was a big Saturday Night Live fan growing up. I love Saturday Night Live. I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. Saturday Night Lives were really good eras. There are so many famous, funny people coming out of that time period. But I've seen a lot of reruns of the old episodes in the 70s. Not as good as I feel like it's a little overhyped. Everybody says, "Oh, the 70s cast." If you talk to anybody that was around in the 70s, they'd say, "Oh, the 70s cast was the best cast." And I go, I still think the 90s cast was the best cast, in my opinion. There were some big names, though. I mean, with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi and Gilda Radner, really good talent, and then Bill Murray joined in the second season, Chevy Chase. Yeah, some huge talent there, for sure, that would do on some good movies and stuff later on. But if you watch those old episodes, they're not all great. They're not all super funny. But there are some good skits as well back then that, if you watch a best of, you can probably get some really good stuff out of it. Anyways, but still, I do have some nostalgia for the old Saturday Night Live because I remember as a kid actually watching reruns and really, really enjoying Saturday Night Live. And like I said, I was a diehard for a long time until probably 2016 when Trump won the presidency, and then all they did was make fun of Trump. I was like, that's not funny anymore. They're just mean-spirited. And yeah, it just was really not funny. Every once in a while, I'll watch an episode and I'll go, man, they're just not funny. Like, they just not funny anymore. They're just super liberal, woke, yeah, which kills comedy, I think. So anyways, but back in the day, and they were always liberal, but they would still be funny. But now they just can't be funny. It seems like very rarely. They do some funny skits every once in a while, I will admit. Like I said, I don't watch the shows. I'll see some clips on YouTube. But anyways, back in the day, man, I never missed a Saturday Night Live. It was one of my favorite shows. I always looked forward to Saturday Night Live. I always looked forward to Saturday night at 10:30 at night and watch it with my dad and my older sister Abby. I think we used to always watch it. Anyway, so yeah, I have some nostalgia, and I've watched a lot of documentary stuff on Saturday Night Live and the making of it, and I've read the book, the oral history of Saturday Night Live. It was a really cool book. So I know a fair amount about how Saturday Night Live came about in the '70s and a lot of the history of it. So it's coming to it. I was thought, man, this is so cool getting to see like history played out in the movie and seeing all these, famous actors being portrayed on screen and how they're going to do, that was kind of cool. Yeah, so the whole movie is just like it's everything. It's like the 90 minutes before the show, the first episode of Saturday Night Live, and yeah, and there's a lot of questions like, can we do it? There's all these issues going on that they have to fix, and they have to cut this skit or something like that. There's a lot of chaos going on, obviously, and there's a lot of questions. Would the show work? Because it's supposed to be kind of an edgy show for that generation. That was the whole idea, I think, behind Saturday Night Live, is that this is not your parents, variety show. It's not Sonny and Cher. It's not, Dean Martin. This is an edgy variety show for the '70s generation. So it was kind of an interesting idea that worked. And like I said, it's been around for 50 years. It's been a huge thing. And yeah, so coming to the movie itself, the big positive I would say about the movie is, man, it is directed really well, and shot very well. Like, I love the way it was shot and choreographed and everything. Because a lot of them, like the very first, I don't know, 10 minutes of the movie I thought was actually pretty incredible. Like, the camera just cams into, Studio AH, whatever, where they did Saturday Night Live, and it's going down hallways, and you just see people doing stuff all over the place. Someone carrying something, somebody talking, anyways. And I was like amazed, like, wow, like look at all these people doing different stuff all around. And there's pretty cool long takes of like going down hallways and following an actor as they're having a conversation with somebody. And then the camera would turn on a different hallway, and then you'd see a different conversation going on. Like, to me, I love that kind of stuff. That stuff always amazes me. It was like, wow, like how did they choreograph that? Everything had to be timed just right, or you had to retake it, and long takes are hard to do. So I was very impressed, in other words, especially the first part of the film. It kind of wears off after a while, because you see it after a while, and that's just the same thing over and over again. And anyways, but yeah, shot very, very well. I think directed very well. I think that's the biggest positive about it. Some of the actors I thought did a really good job portraying the characters. I think my favorite is Dan Aykroyd. The actor who played Dan Aykroyd, man, he nailed Dan Aykroyd. Like, his mannerisms, his sound of his voice, the look, that was a really good Dan Aykroyd. I thought that was absolutely excellent. The guy who played Chevy Chase did a decent job. I think it was a pretty overall decent job of Chevy Chase. John Belushi, I thought he did a pretty good job of John Belushi, though I didn't like the portrayal of John Belushi in the movie. Performance-wise, pretty good. Most of the performance was really good. Gilda Radner was pretty good. I think Lorraine Newman and Jane Curtin were a little bit weak as characters in the movie. Garrett Morris, the guy who played Garrett Morris, which is funny, his last name is actual Morris too. No relations to Garrett Morris, but the Garrett Morris totally nailed Garrett Morris. That's the other, I think, really great kind of impression. I thought, wow, he looks just like Garrett Morris, and he acted he sounded and mannerisms just like Garrett Morris. So I think there's a lot of great performance there. Billy Crystal, the guy who played Billy Crystal. If you don't know, Billy Crystal is supposed to be on the very first Saturday Night Live, but he got cut. And it's a, very, Billy Crystal was not happy about it being cut from the very first episode of Saturday Night Live. He's supposed to do some stand-up comedy. He ended up being a cast member later on, interesting enough, and also doing some stand-up on Saturday Night Live in the '70s. So he ended up coming back, but it was a big deal that he got cut. So it was cool seeing an actor playing Billy Crystal. Like, he nailed Billy Crystal. I thought that was a really good performance, and some of the best parts of the movie was seeing that kind of stuff and going, wow, these are, some of my favorite comedy legends. Really nailed them. Anyways, negatively, I would say the actor who played Lorne Michaels, the main character, I didn't think did a very good job. I didn't think he looked or sounded like Lorne Michaels or even acted like him. it didn't feel like Lorne Michaels to me. Every time I was watching, I'm like, who's that? Oh yeah, it's Lorne Michaels. That's the creator of Silent Live, and we've seen him a lot, over the years, make cameo appearances on Silent Live. So we all know kind of how he sounds and what he looks like. I don't know. It didn't nail him very good. I think the weirdest part is they casted this actor who's like 21 years old, a really young actor. And in real life, Lorne Michaels is like 30, 31 years old. So they cast an actor like 10 years younger. And so I remember I'm watching going, this guy looks way too young to be Lorne Michaels. The whole time I was like, this is just a terrible casting. The other one is there's another actor, Cooper Hoffman, who's Philip Seymour Hoffman's son. He plays a Dick Ebersol, I believe, in the movie. And Cooper Hoffman's also like in his early 20s. And Dick Ebersol was also like in his 30s. Because they were kind of like two bosses of Saturday Night Live. So it's weird seeing these two young kids pretend to be the bosses. And you're like, these two guys are way too young to be the boss. And they're way too young to play these characters. So I thought I don't get that casting at all. I thought that was a real mishap, anyways, in my opinion, of the movie. And the big problem I have with the movie was fun. Like I said, it was really well paced. Like there's a lot of stuff happening. I mean, a lot of storylines with different, like I said, different actors. Each actor had like maybe different storylines going on, and all that. The problem is like, I don't know, it just felt like it was just kind of like a slice of life, I guess. Like we're just seeing like, this, because it's supposed to be the, kind of 90 minutes, and the movie's like 90 minutes. So it's like, okay, we're seeing like almost in real time the 90 minutes before the episode, the very first Saturday Night Live starts. And so we're getting all the behind the scenes stuff. And I don't know, it just felt like watching it, felt like there was no purpose to the movie almost in some sense. It was just, oh, we're just getting ready for Saturday Night Live. But I don't know, it felt like there wasn't a really good driven story to really drive the movie that you're really getting onto. You're just watching all this stuff happen, this chaos happen. And it felt like it needed I don't know how to explain it, but it just needed a better story to really kind of get you involved in what was going on and make you feel like there was no character arcs. It felt like there was no real character arcs. There's no really beginning, middle, end, story-wise, story beats. It's just you're watching stuff happen, and it just felt like, it's missing something that you want out of a good movie. And because the whole movie takes place in one setting. It takes place at 8H anyways. So yeah, so I don't know. It just felt like it wasn't a strong enough story to really make a 90-minute movie out of. And so after a while, I kind of started getting a little tired of the story because it wasn't really a story. It's just we're trying to get everything together for this first episode of Saturday Night Live. I mean, the only story is, will this work? And a lot of doubters, don't think it'll work. And Lorne Michaels trying to prove them, true that this idea that he had of Saturday Night Live will work, I guess, is the story. But kind of, as far as, I don't know, as a plot, it's really weak on plot. I think that kind of hurts the movie in a lot of ways. The other thing is, it felt very inaccurate. It felt like I said, I've read the book on Saturday Night Live. I've watched documentaries. I've read biographies on people that are on Saturday Night Live, and stuff that happened to me felt very inaccurate. Like that stuff did not happen. I feel like I almost want to say like 75% of the stuff in the movie did not happen that they made up for the movie, which I understand. Sometimes you have to make stuff up because you're trying to make, an interesting movie. You're not making a documentary. So you add stuff or whatever that you think will make more tension in the movie. But I don't know, for me, again, if it's like Midas Man, like if you don't know the history, it might not bother you that stuff happens that didn't really happen. But for me, someone who knows kind of what happened, I don't know, it's hard for me not to be bothered by all the inaccuracies of what happened in the movie. That kind of hurt it. Stuff like John Belushi was so weird because the whole story of John Belushi in the movie is that he hadn't signed a contract yet. And so Lorne Michaels just keeps going to him and saying, hey, we need you to sign a contract before, you can start on the show. And man, they portrayed John Belushi as being here's the other thing. There's no likable characters in the movie. Every character pretty much is a big jerk. I mean, Chevy Chase, and they're probably big jerks in real life, but I mean, Lorne Michaels is not a jerk in the movie or anything, but he was just not an interesting character. But, to make a good movie, you need someone to cling on to that you really like. And this movie, I felt like did a really bad job. Like, John Belushi, man, they really made him look bad, I think, in this movie. And like I said, he probably was not a good person in real life. He had a lot of issues, obviously drug issues, and he was a jerk to the women, I've heard, and all this. But they portrayed him as just like this wild maniac that he would throw these tantrums, he would throw stuff at people, he would yell at people, curse people out. That's all his character did. And I'm like, he might have did some of that, but that wasn't the whole John Belushi. I don't know. They just, and the idea that he like wouldn't sign a contract, I don't think that was true. Because he wanted to be on the show. The show was a big deal. He auditioned to get on the show. So I don't get, like, why would you audition to try to get a part on the show and then act like, oh, I'm not going to sign the contract, and act crazy. Like, it didn't make any sense to the character. And I never heard any of that in real life. So that whole part just made no sense. And there's this whole stupid scene where it's like minutes before the show's beginning and he's outside ice skating on the rink, outside Rockefeller, and he falls down and like crashes, like almost kills himself. And it's like, obviously this did not happen. This is a crazy thing that it would be just too crazy to be true, and it wasn't true. It didn't happen. So it's like, why did they add this scene? Anyways, to me, it was like they're just trying to add tension. I know, like, oh, will he not sign on? It's like, well, he does because he was a member of Sound Live for the first 4 years. So obviously he's going to sign on. But I don't know. I thought that was kind of stupid. The other thing is George Carlin. George Carlin was the first host of Saturday Night Live. Anyways, and man, they played Carlin like he was the biggest jerk. And I don't know if he was. Maybe he was a big jerk in real life. But I've never heard stories of him acting this way before, I guess, personally. But they portrayed him like he didn't want to be there. Like, he thought Saturday Night Live was stupid, and like he would just sit in his dresser room doing cocaine basically in the movie, and didn't want to show up on stage. And Lorne Michaels had to beg him to come out, And when he came out, all he did was say "F you, F you, F." The very first line. And it's funny thing is, the actor who played him did a horrible job. He looked and sounded nothing like George Carlin, except for a couple moments. There's like a couple moments where he would have like a kind of George Carlin moment where I'm like, okay, that kind of sounds like George Carlin. But for the most part, he came out and I remember he just comes out of his dressing room and he's just like, F you, F you. That's exact line he says there, but F you, F you, F you. And I'm like, who's this guy? And then I realized, oh, that's George Carlin. Like, I couldn't even figure out who this guy is, because he comes out of nowhere because he hadn't been in the movie yet. And all of a sudden he shows up and starts cursing everybody out. I'm like, who's this guy? Why is he cursing everybody out? And it's like, oh, that's George Carlin, the famous comedian host, And then he gets on stage and he's just a jerk to everybody, cusses everybody out. And I'm like, I never heard of George Carlin being that way. Like, I never heard that he hated being on Saturday Night Live or that he didn't want to be there. I don't know. So that was all weird. Like, why'd they play George Carlin that way? I don't know. To me, it didn't make any sense. Because I don't think that was accurate at all. Anyway, that's just a couple moments, but there's moments like that throughout the whole movie where I'm like, that did not happen. That was, there's just too many things we can talk about. But so there's a lot of negatives there. The movie, it's not super funny. There's a couple funny moments here and there. Even though it's kind of a comedy, it's not really about, big laughs, I would say. There's one, oh man, there's too much to talk about this movie. I'm having a hard time just, because I need to end this video soon. But there's this other writer, Donahue, who they portrayed in the movie. The guy nailed Donahue because he was a real jerk in real life, and he was like one of the head writers of the show. They did do a good job with him because he was a jerk in real life, from what I've heard. And the things that he said sound like what he would say in real life. And the actor nailed him. He totally sounded like him. Anyway, so there's some good moments there. Like, the movie ends with the very first Live from New York at Saturday Night Live, whatever, with John Belushi and Donahue, with that famous first skit, where Chevy Chase comes out and says the very first Live from New York Saturday Night Live. So that was kind of cool to see that. That was like the only skit we really saw. We saw snippets of skits, Of course, the movie wasn't about the actual show. It was about, all the chaos getting to the first episode. And there's stuff like the lighting guy, like, quits or something like that, and they don't have any lighting, and then they hired this guy off the street. Like, I don't think that happened. Like, there's just all kinds of, like, all these chaotic moments happening. Oh, like Paul, what's his name? Yeah, they do. It's just so funny when you see these different actors go, oh man, that's that famous, I forget his name, but Paul. He was the music guy, and he was on David Letterman. They had him portrayed there. He did a pretty good job too. It was funny seeing him portrayed on screen. Anyways, so many great stuff. As far as like the different famous actors portrayed, I thought most part did a good job. A couple, like I said, a couple moments were not good. I'm being pretty negative on the movie because I expected more out of it. Overall, I don't know. I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5 stars, like a light recommend. If you know anything about Silent Live, if you're not a fan of Silent Live, I don't know how you would see this movie. If you're a big fan of Silent Live, I think it's a movie worth watching just to get some nostalgia out of it and go, oh man, yeah, that's how they did the beginning, you know. Though I think if you're a big Silent Live fan, you'll see all the inaccuracies like I did, unfortunately. But that being said, like it's not one that you have to watch or rush out to watch, but it was a neat idea for a movie, I would say, and not a bad watch if you see it on streaming. That's Saturday Night Live, anyways. Well, my time's up. I was going to talk about 2 documentaries, but I'll have to save that for next time. Anyway, so that's at least 3 movies I can review for this time around that I've been watching. So, yeah, if you've seen any of those 3 movies, you know, feel free to comment. What do you think about these movies? Or if you want to see them, you know, hopefully you got some good recommendations from me. Besides that, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for liking it. And thank you to all my subscribers for supporting the channel. I appreciate you all and hope you have